Hi people, welcome to Blue K Jazz Dancing, the Blue Lab. Just coming to the final stages of doing DISJ. Dancing in the Spirit of Jazz is my story, my legacy. And I'm going to give you some insight into me preserving, protecting and promoting my legacy. Now I want to really share with individuals, I started this in 81 and I'll share ways and why. But I want to start with the setbacks. 2009, what happened was I had blood poisoning, so the latter stages of me sharing my legacy was I was supposed to finish my degree and have my father, my mother and family come to be there at the award ceremony. 2 modules short of my degree, I got sepsis, had to take a proof time out. I never got back because I got sepsis, and then what happened was as an individual I then got carbon monoxide poisoning, had a house fire, and I lost all the documentation and facts, videos, records, basically my record of my preservation of my history. I lost a lot of it, 98% of it, and the material that was could be used on a website was lost. What happened was, a beautiful thing that happened was, what happened when I took a proof time out, I immediately used dance as a way to keep myself alive. That's the number one thing. And immediately when I came out, for 5 years at university I was practicing consciously, 4 years at university, but 5 years in education. I went back to refining my styles and merging the styles, many different styles of UK jazz dance. UK jazz dance is an umbrella term for a number of UK underground jazz dance cultures. Do you understand? It's important people understand. Each style is a culture. So Latin jazz, mambo jazz we have mambo jazz culture. Do you understand? We had soul jazz, soul jazz culture, jazz funk. We had jazz funk culture. It's important that people understand that, because all the people are written on the dance styles of all identified them as scenes. They were not scenes, they're all cultures. I say so as one of the pioneering artists of that day. And so what happened was, basically, what happened when I came back, I was engaging immediately. I'd been training for 5 years and immediately could tap into the cutting edge programs that were happening with live improvisational performance. Had come a key thing which I wanted to happen from 81. I was involved in live improvisational performance, but it couldn't get no mainstream acceptance, and especially West Indian dancing, which wasn't viewed as an art form anyway. And it's important for people to know this is the reason why DSJ came about in 1981. 1981, why would 1981? 91 was the riots of 1981 happened, but people didn't know what happened after the riots. Well, people didn't know how the riots happened, that's first of all. 2, what happened in the riots, and 2, what happened after the riot. There was the first international conference to do with black people's presence in Britain. What happened was, scholars around the world came to Britain because they were very much concerned and very disheartened. The British media made West Indians out to be sponges, to be these dangerous people. We're less than 1% of the population. We were being killed off, we were being maimed. That from slavery, we got maimed, killed and raped. Okay? Then colonialization did exactly the same thing. Raped, ill-treated. Anywhere we've gone, we've been ill-treated. We fought in wars. People hid that history. Our history, our legacy of achievement was hidden. Well, basically what this conference is about was basically sharing the legacy of African diaspora people, black people's presence in Britain, and what they brought to Britain, and basically identifying Britain's wealth came off the back of African diaspora people, of the back of Asian people, off the back of the colonies. And it was unacceptable that Britain was trying to make out that we as African diaspora people were sponging off Britain, and most importantly, we were menace to society. Who were menace to British society was British children. Get this very clear, it's important. African diaspora, West Indian people brought a hard work ethic here, brought amazing cultural life, they brought amazing optimism through their arts, and it was unacceptable to them, the scholars, and they started to write on it. I had a teacher, my teacher, Roy Blackman, was at that conference, and he as an individual brought back the papers to me. I was an artist in my community already, as well as an independent promoter. In 1981, my life changed, and I created DISJ, Dancing in the Spirit of Jazz. I identified to individuals, do you know that we as individuals, as black African diaspora people, our parents taught us to dance in the spirit of jazz, to push the boundaries of our learning. We use jazz values. And we weren't the only ones. All cultures all cultures were trained to see West Indians and Africans as inferior due to black and white minstrelsy. But what happened was, if you take that away, what happened was we were all taught to dance in the spirit of jazz. And dancing in the spirit of jazz didn't come through jazz. It came from all people who worked on the land were taught the same values. They were taught to have hard work ethics. They were taught to create activities to bond their community. Create activities to build camaraderie. That is all part of dancing spirit of jazz. You create activities to build your confidence, to keep you hopeful, to keep you optimistic. That's what jazz did. Because remember, it came through the blues. The blues, through the hardships and struggles that people went through, what was important, that they had an optimism that tomorrow they could change what they were doing. And what happened was they would proactively be doing that. So when you talk about slavery, people revolted against slavery to see the end of it. And it came about. What happened again? Colonialization. People fought against colonialization, and the end of it came from people pushing the boundaries of their learning, training and development, politically, economically, technologically, environmentally, legally, socially, physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. Do you understand? And what happened was, it never happened just with one culture doing it. It was cultural diverse people were involved in the end of slavery. Cultural diverse people were involved in the end of colonialization. That's what people need to know. Sometimes we get caught up forgetting many people of different nations were involved in the freeing of people because they felt we have people who are humanitarians. We have people who seek justice and truth for a people. And it doesn't matter what culture they are. And that's what jazz brought to us. Jazz created an umbrella for people to get together of different cultures and share themselves through music, through literature, through film, through dance. That's what jazz did. And it brought people equality. Because on the jazz bandstand, no one has power. No one's seen as superior to one another. No. But jazz had certain developments that were important. So from how it began in New Orleans, etc., etc., people forgetting West Indians, cultural diversity is the biggest cultural diversity you ever could have in the world. And that cultural diversity is one of humanitarianism. And they brought that into the world. So when they traveled, the West Indians brought something that was special. They brought a new cultural diversity that other cultures did not see. They saw cultural diversity firsthand. They've seen trauma in an unprecedented way. You remember, West Indian culture is historical, what happened in the West Indies. That type of slavery has never been seen before, and there was slavery for thousands and thousands of years, but this slavery was never seen before. We have to understand the amount of trauma, the amount of rape, the amount of low life expectancy of people, the lack of what trauma the people felt from being kidnapped, put on a ship, seeing people die, then hauled out through stench at the bottom of a ship, come out of the ship being danced, then the women were raped on the ship, boom, then they were sold, then they were raped again. The women were raped multiple times and then bred. Men were raped. So let's get this clear. Boys were raped. Remember the top boys at a certain age, they were raped, and girls were raped. People really have to understand the significance. People have to understand the significance. Dancing Spirit Jazz talks about. You have to learn the history of jazz, and jazz takes you back to great African kingdoms, and you can't avoid slavery. Let's get that clear. And you can't avoid colonialization, because jazz played a part in bringing down the end of colonialization. Jazz had a part in bringing down slavery, because remember, the music was around. The whole idea of syncopated music was around in the drumming before the instruments got brought about. But these instruments were already in Africa already. The trumpet was already in Africa and China. Do you understand? It was not a new British invention. Britain, if you look at British instruments, they come from other cultures. And that's the most important thing about dancing spirit jazz. You push the boundaries of your learning and development to understand yourself. So I'm an African diaspora brother. What's my DNA is African. My dad is Jamaican and my mom is Grenadian. I have north-south, and I was brought together. My parents came together in a time when Jamaicans and Grenadians never got together as a people. So that was one of the key things I had as a person. I came like a humanitarian person within the Caribbean community, because what happened was there was challenges between small island, what they call small island, big island, that have been brought in by Europeans, making one island think they're better than another island. It's important, and I was involved in that. Do you understand? Issues to do with dark skin and light skin were part of my world, being a dark skinned child, growing up with a black and white minstrel show. Again, this art form came into my life It had a role and purpose. So one of the key things I talk about in 1981, I talk about what's happened is people have made you have a mindset to stereotype black people as black culture as having no relevance, had no role and responsibility. Stop for a second and think about what was the role of jazz. Now they're showing you what happened. Jazz had a role to make you feel good about who you were, to enable you to celebrate, to escape, to find yourself, to raise your consciousness, to distress you because people are under stress. Not for 1 second has anybody had a conversation I ever had till I brought it up of people talked about the bebop musicians. What stress were they facing in society at large, socially, physically, intellectually, culturally, emotionally, spiritually, legally? What happened to them? No one thinks about it. The swing musicians, the swing dancers, what stress were they facing? What were the African diaspora slaves facing? Because people talk about slavery and don't talk about the word stress. You don't talk about the word trauma. You don't talk about the word being kidnapped. What does it feel like? So what happens through studying Dancing the Spirit of Jazz, you learn to be empathetic to people's needs. And you learn to have an understanding that there was a legacy of leaders, of individuals that stood up to improve people's lives through jazz. They wanted to have people to have an activity that they could build their confidence, give them a positive self-image in a society that viewed them as inferior. You must understand, not to 1959 was jazz music recognized as music equal to that of Western music, not to 1959. You have to understand the importance of what I'm saying. So when I came into the world in 1964, there was no discrimination laws. I was born in the slums of 64. And in the slums of 64, people could discriminate against Irish and blacks. They couldn't get housing in the slums of Moss Side, the slums of Manchester. Do you know what the slums of Manchester look? That's how much the society had made people hate us. So I talk about Dancing the Spirit of Jazz, how it brought me humanitarian values. People don't understand. My music is a music, when you study it, is about about people learning to understand other cultures. And I was brought up not to hate others. That's the most important thing I want to talk about DSJ. Dancing the Spirit of Jazz. Our parents brought us into this world to try to learn about other cultures, but other cultures didn't want to learn about us. That is what I learned. I've been to my experiences. I have been one of a few blacks in one university, 05 to 09. Higher Education College, Engineering College, I was one of a few blacks in my engineering college. In my primary school, one of a few blacks. In my secondary school, one of a few blacks. In the arts, studying ballet where I was, one of a few blacks. Studying contemporary, one of a few blacks. Studying tap, one of a few blacks. Studying modern, one of a few black people. Do you understand? The trips I went on in church, one of a few black people. In sports, one of a few black people. Do you understand? And my parents taught me not to hate. But when I went to some of these places, some people hated me because the society had told them to hate me. But they hated me because of stereotypes. And I broke stereotypes. So part of Dancing the Spirit of Jazz, the leaders recognize that racism exists, discrimination exists, and we're going to do something about it. So who did something about it? For example, today, Misty Copeland, the ballet dancer. Carlos Acosta. These are some of my artists that I talk about now. Yeah, who did something about it. Do you understand? The Dance Theatre of Harlem, black ballet companies did something about it. Alvin Haley, Dance Theatre of Harlem, Phoenix. When they came, they used the art to what? Break stereotypes, because they were told, one, they couldn't dance in the way that Westerners dance. So part of my work has been, as an individual, my own art form, UK jazz dance, known as old school jazz dance, UK underground jazz dance, was debased by the society I lived in. It was debased by the dance educational institutions. It was debased by the performing arts education institutions. And it was people like myself, DSJ dancers, and people who didn't dance. It's important. People can dance in the spirit of jazz without actually dancing, because it's a practice of pushing the boundaries of your learning. It's about the practice of challenging stereotypes. And I've worked, one of my key things was I found, luckily, people who danced in the spirit of jazz. Leaders like Stella Canoe, leaders like my brother, leaders like my friend Papa Ye, leaders like my sister, leaders like my niece Nikwa, who just recently got a master's, my nephew Jonathan, who's doing sports science. You know what I'm saying? The significance of my nephew doing sports science is important because many black people would discourage their children from doing sports science. But times have changed. And who created that change? African diaspora people made changes in Britain. And that comes from dancing the spirit of jazz. They pushed the boundaries of the learning thinking. They pushed the boundaries of challenging legal unjust laws that stopped us. So one of the legal unjust laws was the banning of the drum, is an example. That led to my art form being developed. It led to dancing the spirit of jazz. People found alternative ways to keep their jazz dance alive. And that's one of the key things I share with people with DSJ. DSJ is about people's liberty and freedom taken away. How do you keep it alive? You keep it alive by keeping yourself alive first through free-spirited activities. I'm a father. The first thing I taught my child was to be free-spirited because I knew if my child's not free-spirited, they won't be able to be themselves. So what happens, I talk about improvisation. You need to know to freestyle as a skill or to improvise as a skill, you need to be free-spirited first. You need to be liberated in yourself. And most people are not liberated. They're self-conscious about who they were. So what happened, I as an individual, around the world from very young age, I taught people dance. Because that was one of the key things that helped people to be free-spirited. And people see the significance. When I teach people to be free-spirited in dance, basically I teach them the way that I got taught. We just put music on, we dance. Everybody just make a fool of themselves. They just dance, and I call it, how it first started is you're dancing it out. You just hear the music, you just dance.